Once upon a time, an old man crossed a bridge into a city that looked sad and dark even in the daylight. Can a city cry? Well, if a city could, then this one would. The Ferris wheel stood still and rusted. No one would dare to swim in the lake filled with trash and neglect. The gates of the city were broken when the flower man walked toward them, but he was glowing as if he knew a secret. Well, no one notices the flower man, despite his glowing and even his chuckling as he seems to challenge the despair, the division, the danger, and the darkness all around him. The city is blind to him. They are looking down the way people do when they have given up. The flower man finds a rundown house in the center of town and says, "This'll do just fine." Strangely, no one notices him as he literally glows with anticipation. The young girl is preoccupied with her boredom. The man sits in a bath but never feels clean. The painter stares at the blank canvas. The elderly woman carries too much. The thief is plotting, and no one notices the flower man. No one except the little girl next door. The flower man sets to work, replacing brokenness with beauty. Two little girls are just in awe. A few adults who brave a glance are mostly cynical or even offended. Most of the folks from the sad city hurry by without even looking up. And then it happened. The moment the flower man knew would come, he knew it would change everything. And just as the thief was plotting to steal the beauty that the neighbors still didn't understand, the flower man gave it away. A gift so delicious that the little girl next door begged her mommy for one. The milkman was plain old shocked, but the artist was inspired. The flower man gets busy doing what he came to do, giving flowers away. The city seems to whisper and even shout, "Life is coming." The streets are aglow with it. "Can it come to the fountain?" the little boy asks. "It is coming to my canvas," the artist declares. "It has come to my window?" the bathing man amuses. Despite the beauty all around, to some, life can be frightening. So the little girl next door says a quiet goodbye and is moved quickly away. But life makes the old woman smile, and the old man scratches his head. The mother prays, the beggar receives, and the thief weeps. Because life cannot be stolen, it can only be given away. The flower man has a cookout, and the streets turn into a block party. Dancing, music, laughter, and games. Loneliness is swallowed up by joy. The canvases are beautiful. The stories of the ancients are told. Intimacy is in the window, and the fountain is flowing again. And joy lights the night. Games and music fill the streets. Their hearts are pulsing with life. Their hands are filled to overflowing. They cannot see over it. They cannot see that the flower man has packed up his bag of seeds and journeyed on. The flower man leaves the city aglow with love, answered prayers, and hope. Why did he leave? He left because there is someone who needs a flower, someone who couldn't get to him, so he will go to them, and he will bring them life.
Life on Mission. That is the series that we're in right now, and week 2 today, and Life on Mission. What that's about, living out the life that God has intended for you to live as an individual and as a church. It's an exciting series as it challenges us, it encourages us to be the people that God has intended us to be. And I'm thankful to be a part of that today and sharing with you as we continue in Life and Mission. Last week, Devin had shared as he introduced the first part of Life on Mission is the different pictures of if you had one job. You know, you had one job, and if you mess that up, the impact that has. I was thinking about that, and I had just a couple weeks ago, as I was driving down my street, it was this Sunday, it was after services, and I was heading back to the house, and there was a squirrel in my road, and I slowed down, did not hit the squirrel. And the squirrel runs away, and I come up closer, I see what the squirrel is up to or what he's doing, and at one of the big giant potholes that's in my yard, there's potholes in my yard right now too, but in the street, all down the road, we've got all sorts of potholes that have been an issue for us. There was a whole pile of acorns just filled into this pothole. And then down the street over the next week, about 2 or 3 other potholes started to fill up with acorns, and I see the squirrels just active down our road. This happened to be the same time when all the work had just suddenly stopped because of some labor disputes with the construction workers. And the squirrels were filling up the potholes then with some acorns. Like, hey, go for it. That's awesome. I've spent a lot of money on my cars this year trying to keep them going and fix them because of all the damage done. And the squirrel's, that's not necessarily his job. There's one job that day, put some acorns in these holes here and fill these things up. Doing the job that God has intended for you to do is what life on mission is about, and finding that role. And that's what we want to encourage you with today, as we are the church. And we as a church have that one job. We have that one job, and what is it? It's to be witnesses to others for Jesus Christ. To be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the utmost parts of the world, as the Great Commission puts it. That's why we're left here on the planet, so we can do this. To make disciples, to make Jesus followers, to engage in the lives of other people, to encourage them into right relationship with God. And how we do that is through some action points. Last week we focused on the first action step of connect. Merely connecting with people, especially as Christians, to connect with non-Christians, to find those opportunities to connect with people in a way that you can continue to share faith with them. But not just to connect, the second action point that we'll focus on today is taking it one step further, and that is to serve. To serve one another, and to serve in a way that shows the love of Jesus and makes an impact in the neighborhood that you're in the community that you're in, or even the family that you're in. And how do we serve, and what example do we have of that that is better than that of Jesus Christ? We could probably hinge this entire message today and this whole idea and this thought on Mark chapter 10, verse 45. In that passage it says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and give his life as a ransom for many." That's the example we have of Jesus Christ, as he came here to earth to serve others, not to come to be served. And not only did he serve, but he gave his life as a ransom for many. So there's no greater example we can have than Christ. So today we're going to focus a little bit on some of the teaching and the lessons from Jesus Christ on serving and the impact that should have on us as we then reach out and serve others. One day Jesus was asked a question, and it was a question asked of him to really trick him, and that was, what is the greatest commandment? What is the greatest commandment? If there's one thing I should do, what should that thing be? What is the greatest commandment? And Jesus had responded with, the greatest commandment has two parts. It's love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, a person who was part of this conversation, this guy had a follow-up question to that, and it was a really dumb follow-up question. Sometimes you get those dumb follow-up questions. They're like when you say, someone asks you something and you say, I don't know, and then they proceed with another question asking for more details. I don't know means I don't know. I can't give any more details than that. Someone asks for directions. You know how to get to the restaurant? I don't know. Well, do I go down here and turn left, or do I turn right? I don't mean I don't know means I don't know. I don't know any more information to give you. But he gives this follow-up question to Jesus on this greatest commandment. And that he asks, who is my neighbor? He asked that question, well, who is my neighbor? And this is a question that's kind of loaded, really, of this person who's asking this. And Jesus knew this guy wasn't dumb, and he wasn't just asking some silly follow-up question. He was really asking something, and it's put best in Luke chapter 10, verse 29, that the man wanted to justify his actions, which is why he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? What does that mean, justify his actions? I interpret it as this. This man wanted to find out, what's the least I have to do? Who is my neighbor? Who is it that I have to love? Because if there's people I don't have to love, that's great. I'm going to avoid them. I'm just going to love the ones that I'm supposed to do. What is it that I have to do in order to do the very least to get by and to somehow make God happy? That's really the questions he's asking. And Jesus sees right through this. He sees this question being asked, and he sees right through this, and he sees what I could describe in the word as being a gracist. Well, what is a gracist? It's not really a word, but we're going to use it like this. Don't be a gracist. A gracist in this context means it's a person who says, I deserve to be with God and you don't. It's somehow think that God's grace is good enough for me, but it's not good enough for you or that person because of this in their life or that in life. Being a gracist, just applying grace to certain people. Jesus encountered this time and time again as he taught and as he shared with people here on earth. This idea of gracism. And as if God's grace cannot extend to the deepest reaches of our sin. And as he deals with this, we find that Jesus is always rooting for the underdog. He's always rooting for the powerless, the poor, the left behind, the imprisoned, the orphaned, the widowed, the aged, the mentally ill, the social outcast, the sick and the lepers. People that Jesus called the least of these. And he wants those people to be equally important to us. So as we connect and we are challenged to serve, we can't be a gracist as we do that. The least of these. Who do you consider the least of these then? Is it those who never pay you back? Is it those whose own choices have put them in difficult situation? And you're expected to do something to help? Is it those whose lifestyle or even political opinion is different than yours? The point is, we don't really have the right to exclude anyone from our acts of compassion, because everyone is a person that Jesus came to serve, that Jesus came to die for. Every single person on earth. We should find a way to serve and connect with the love of Jesus so that they can come into right relationship with God as we are coming into right relationship with God. James chapter 2, verse 14 through 17 puts it very pointed in this way. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, well, goodbye and have a good day, stay warm and eat well. But then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. It is dead and useless. Yes, we are saved by faith, but if we just have faith and don't do anything with it, it's dead. It's useless. Biblical knowledge is important, but it can't just be biblical knowledge. It has to be biblical knowledge in action. My computer, for that matter, my cell phone, my mobile phone, has every scripture. It knows every verse in the Bible, and in every translation I would want it to ask it. It knows all that, but it doesn't make it a Christian. What makes it a Christian, what makes us a Christian is the action of our faith. It was interesting, the title Christian was first given to the believers in the early church. It was given to them by people on the outside. It wasn't because of what the wisdom that they possessed as Christians. It's because of the actions that they did. It is described as Christians, Christ followers, people who were showing Christ. That's the challenge that we have. That is the encouragement that we have. Theodore Roosevelt has this quote, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." So as we look at this point on serving, it really makes that first point of connecting mean something. When we connect with people and we just leave it there, and we don't serve, we don't really show that caring. We don't really show that in-depth concern for someone else's life. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you ever get nervous or worked up or just anxious about how can I be a witness to someone else? How can I share Jesus with someone else? I don't know enough. And I know Devin talked about this last week some as well. That just is an obstacle to get in our way. It starts with how much we show how we care for the things that we do and allow God then to speak through us in that way. Jesus confronts the gracism of this guy's follow-up question by doing something he did so well to teach a point, and that is he tells a story. As he tells stories, he uses those stories in such a powerful way to really bring about the lesson that he wants us to learn. The story that he told there in Luke chapter 10, picking up in verse 30 and reading on, was that parable of the Good Samaritan. Parable that many of you have heard before, where we have a story of a Jewish man who was attacked while he's traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho. He is stripped of his clothes, he's beat up, and he's left half dead beside the road. And then Jesus tells a story that by chance a priest comes along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed by. And a temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there. But he also passed by on the other side. Then, in the New Living Translation, the descriptive word here is despised. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." Then Jesus asked the question, now which one of these was a neighbor? And of course, the answer is the Samaritan. And we see the action that happens here is we have a church leader, someone involved in the church, who both walk by this person, and then someone who's considered despised is the one who shows the action to them, shows that care, shows that willingness to serve someone else. Sometimes we get so wrapped up and busy in church things that we forget to care about others. That's the irony of it, and we have to be careful about that. I know we are looking at vision and planning and really just keying in our church and what's the most important things, engaging in people's lives and serving. We can be like that priest or that temple assistant, that churchgoer who walks by and doesn't do anything, thinking someone else will take care of this. Or we can be like the Samaritan. Jesus teaches that through that story, and with that, he melts away the idea of gracism, and he melts away the idea of being too busy not to care. I'm going to describe it like this: serve by stop, drop, and roll. You know, we might remember the phrase stop, drop, and roll. You might have learned that as a kid. If you're on fire, the best way to get the fire out is by stop, dropping, and rolling. And they share that, continue to share that. I had a student just recently, and I won't embarrass her by saying her name, but I thought it was really funny, and she laughed about it too. She's like, I heard you're supposed to stop, drop, and roll if there's a fire in the building. What does that do for the fire in the building? It's like, no, you don't stop, drop, and roll if the fire's on the building. You get out of the building, but if you happen to catch on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. But to serve by stop, drop, and roll is what I mean is this. Sometimes we need to stop in our busyness, or we need to stop in our lives to notice what's going on in the lives of other people. And we need to drop to our knees, or we need to step off, or get off our high horse, thinking we're too good to engage in this service or that, to engage in the lives of other people. And then we need to roll into action to serve. Stop, drop, and roll when it comes to service. It is something that we need to get involved with, because it can't just be about my life, trying to get my life right, and then just get through life. That's not what God has called us to. He's called us into right relationship with Him, but not just to have a relationship with Him, not just to have faith in Him, but to do something with that. He's called us to serve. There's a speaker and author, Philip Yancey, and he makes this great challenge: that the people of God are not merely to mark time, waiting for God to step in and set right all that is wrong. Rather, they are to model the new heaven and new earth, and by doing awaken longings for what God will someday bring to pass. What that means is we're not just to just mark time. We set our lives right with God, and then we just get through life, waiting for God then to come in and make everything right. We are the ones that God has called to serve others, and we are the ones that God has called to help make a difference and help make things right, to bring heaven into earth and take as much earth as we can to heaven. That is the challenge and the blessing that we have to be a part of as well. Get past the gracism, get past the busyness, and then one other obstacle that I find myself hitting sometimes too, and that is getting past the preoccupation with my own needs. I get it. There are needs, there are hurts that go on in life that make it so difficult sometimes just to get through day by day. But I look at Jesus Christ, and I look at His example when He was at His time of most greatest need, probably greatest stress in His life, and that would have been the time when He's going to meet with His disciples the night before He's going to be betrayed, the night before He's going to be crucified. At that moment, He knows what is going to happen. He knows what's going on. And in John chapter 13, verse 1 through 5, we read in that section what He was facing and what was going through His mind. And it reads like this: Before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that His hour had come to leave this world and to return to His Father. He had loved His disciples during His ministry on earth, and now He loved them to the very end. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given Him authority over everything, and that He had come from God and would return to God. And before I read that next part right there, if I was in that situation, the next verse starts with the word so, and it says what Jesus did here. If I was in that situation, I walk in a room, I know someone here really doesn't like me so much, who's going to betray me, over to people that are going to inflict horrible punishment upon me and bring me to death. that next word so would be followed with the words, and he's out. I walked in, I saw that, I'm feeling that, experienced that, and I'm out. But that's not what this passage concludes with. The word so is followed with in this passage. So he got up from the table, he took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around them. We see Jesus engaging in an act of service. I find that to be absolutely profound in the moment where he could be completely preoccupied in what's going on in his own life and what he's going to be facing. What does he do? He serves. Why does he do that? That's what his mission is. And I also find it really energizing that when we serve, even in the midst of sometimes our own turmoil, it brings joy. It sometimes brings that joy back into our lives. Just simple little things to start with, and serving helps us move out of that obstacle, moves out of that trap of just thought of everything that's going on in our lives, and to do something for someone else, and the joy that that does bring. That is real. We have to get uncomfortable with serving. Jesus got uncomfortable doing the thing that the servant was supposed to do in the room, washing the disciples' feet. I've asked Rachel Chalfant to come and share, and actually she asked me to share today as well. And Rachel has had a lot that has gone on in her life over this last year that God has just given some direction and challenge to her, and it's a great testimony that fits right in today with this idea of getting uncomfortable and sharing. So I'm going to ask Rachel to come on up and share in her testimony.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I absolutely love comfort. It's my favorite place to be because I know exactly what's going on, and I know how to control it, and if things are uncomfortable, then I work really hard to make them comfortable again. I am comfortable in my family, I am comfortable with my friends, and I'm especially comfortable in church. I have went here since I was born, day 3. I went here for almost 21 years, and I am comfortable here. I am comfortable. Before this past year, I was comfortable with sitting in the pew and thinking that somebody else is going to go out and do the job because I am not comfortable with leaving where I love, and I did not think that I was equipped enough to go out in the world and serve. As people come up here and talk about serving and going to different places and going to Africa, I am not that, and so I use that as an excuse to sit in a pew and think that as long as I am doing very well in the church and serving to my capacity in the church in 4 walls, then I will be fine because it's not who God has called me to be. God has completely shattered that perspective for me in this past year. He has shown me that it's so much more than sitting in a church. It's leaving the church and getting the 1 out of the 99, which has been incredible for me to see and actually live out, and it makes the complete difference in my life. This past year, I am such an introvert that I really just don't like leaving my comfort zone. It's just where I like to stay. I'm not loud and outgoing. Sometimes I can be, but most of the time people would describe me as quiet and timid, and that's just who I've been. So like being an extrovert and going out, I didn't think that I could go out and serve because I wasn't an extrovert and I wasn't who I was supposed to be in order to serve others and really get other people to come to Christ. But God has definitely changed that in the past 4 years. He's been working on my heart slowly but surely, and it's been amazing that he took something that was a passion when I was in high school and I went to a conference of going to Northern Ireland. And that was something that was out of my comfort zone because I definitely thought that I did not need to go overseas because Jackson is so hurt and distorted and that I can focus all of my time and energy here. But God took me out of my comfort zone in this past year and took me across the sea, so it would really show me that I need to look at Jackson from a different perspective. In my comfort, I remembered this Northern Ireland trip last year, but I started to talk myself out of it because I didn't want to go on a plane for the first time by myself. It was a trip with 15 people from across the United States that I didn't know. So it was with nobody that I knew. I didn't have my family. I would be on a plane for the first time by myself without my family or my friends. But somebody, praise Jesus, that he walked beside me. He sat me down and he was like, we're going to fill out this application and I'm going to sit here until you do because I think that you need to go on this trip. And so I filled it out and I got into it, and it was late in the game, so I didn't think that I would be able to go because it was a lot of money in a couple of months, and it was completely, I didn't think that I was ready for it. But thanks to you guys, and thank you for so much of the support and prayer and time and energy and just the money that you poured into this trip, because you made it possible for this past year to be absolutely amazing for me and for God to work through you in order to reach me. But I went to Northern Ireland in May, and the day before I didn't want to go, and I almost considered just leaving it and not going because I was scared, because I didn't like out of my comfort zone again. But Northern Ireland was absolutely incredible, and the places that we got to see were amazing and beautiful, and seeing C.S. Lewis, where he got his inspiration for Narnia, was just breathtaking. But the most amazing part about that trip was I got to spend 3 hours every night with the youth there. And that was our mission field going to Northern Ireland. The youth there have trouble with suicide and mental illnesses, and that's just a big struggle over there. And the divide between Catholics and Protestants, that's just never a safe place. They have different school systems. So I got to work in this building for the whole entire week, where it was this safe space for all kinds of children to come. And I absolutely love youth, so that this was a youth organization, it fit perfectly with my heart and my passion, and God knew exactly where to take me. That was still in my comfort zone, but definitely uncomfortable. He kept the youth there, and the youth just had this safe spot, that it didn't matter who you were, because we're teaching the love of Christ, and the love of Christ is more than anything else. And so we got to go there, and there was this girl that absolutely captured my heart. And like I said, I'm a timid and quiet person. And this girl, she is a lot more on the rougher side. Like, one of the first things you know about her is that she plays rugby, and so she could definitely beat me up. But she still had a soft spot for me, so I just rolled with it. And so I just got to pour out the love of Christ to her, because she did not know what love was. She wanted to find love from me. She wanted to find love from anybody that would come and just show her love, because she didn't have that in her family. And so much of me desperately wanted to just tell her, and I did try, but the truest form of love was the love of Christ, and it was something that I could try to give her, but until she knows Christ, she's not going to know what love was. And so during that time, I found such an immense amount of joy, as Todd was saying, that joy was the thing that absolutely kept me going during that trip. It was joyful to see all of the places and go to all of these things, but the truest and most absolutely astounding type of joy was at night. You were up since 8, and at night you all of a sudden just had this new energy and this newfound hope for these people, and you were excited to be there even though you had a long day of sightseeing. That it completely just takes over who you are, and it just gives you the strength and a shield. As Psalm 28:7 says, "The Lord is my strength and my shield. I trust him with all my heart. He helps me, and my heart is filled with joy. I burst out in songs of thanksgiving." That's what you wanted to do during the night when you were with these kids, and that they were so high energy. It was your strength, and it just filled you, and you just wanted to scream with all of the joy that Christ had given you. And it was something that you can never experience on your own whim or what you were trying to figure out by yourself. It was something that was ordained by God, and it was something that was given by God, the truest of forms of joy. And so leaving that trip, it was so hard, because I had felt the truest amount of joy, and I felt purpose in that moment. And so I came back, and I wanted to find something that would completely fill that again. And I wanted to spend my life doing that joyful thing of serving for God, because when I served, that's when I felt the most joy. And so during that time, I came back, and I decided that it was time for me to do something with my summer. I had worked a retail job, and I loved it, but I knew that it was time for me to get out of that comfort of having a steady job that paid well, and I needed to actually step out of that comfort and find something that God is calling me more to. And God brought upon Spring Hill camps, and I got to work with youth. I got to work with high schoolers all summer, and they were fantastic. But before I got to that point, God showed me this is the truest amount of patience that God has had. The past 4 years, he has been molding and shaping my heart, and I was in denial about what I wanted to do with my life. I had decided on something. I was 2 years into college. I did not love what I was going into, and I still had 4 more years left. And God was like, I've already placed so many opportunities in front of you, and now it's time for you to fully realize that I have called you into youth ministry, but not the kind of youth ministry that you're thinking of. I have called you into going into conferences and camps and doing all of these things that you absolutely love and where you get joy from. And so going into the summer with this newfound identity, but my identity wasn't found in any kind of job that I was going to do because I knew that I could praise God wherever I was. It was the found identity that God is going to work, and he is going to give me something where my heart absolutely overflows with doing the work for him on earth. And so this summer I got to go to Spring Hill Camp, and I got to work with high schoolers, and it would not have been the same without these high schoolers. God allowed me to have these deep conversations with these kids until late into the night and just show them that the church was more than what they thought, because they had went to church but they didn't understand church. They thought that they were a good Christian, like if they went to youth group and if they went to church on Sunday. But it was so hard to kind of convince them that church is so much more than a building and it's a place, but it's a lifestyle. It's who you are for the rest of your life. And a lot of these kids, like some of them didn't even have faith, and they went to a Christian camp, and God was just, and some of them did have faith, but they were still trying to find it and figure it out. And God had placed so many of us in these hands and in this place that it was absolutely incredible to see God work. And I could go to bed at 1 a.m. after talking to students and wake up at 5 a.m. to start my day. But I still had so much energy and so much joy that could not have been on my own standard. If it would have been on the standard of, you have to get 8 hours of sleep, I would have been doomed all summer. But God was able to wake me up at 5 a.m. and give me a smile on my face and start my day right. Because if you know me, I'm a terrible morning person, and I'm super grumpy, and I won't talk to you for like an hour because I'm waking up. But God woke me up at 5 a.m. and was ready to start the day with me and ready to give me this newfound energy and joy and hope that my high schoolers in the morning would be like, stop being so hyper. It's 5. Get out. But God had just given me this immense amount of joy, and it was absolutely incredible that he was able to work through me in that. And I'm coming back now, and I'm so ready for the journey that God has still called me on. And if I would have just listened to what all of my doubts would have said a year ago about not being ready enough, not being good enough, and if I would have just sat in the pew, I would have missed so many more things that God has called me to in my life. I would have been complacent in just living through life, but not actually fully living for God. I would have been living for myself. And so it's been amazing that I had to leave my comfort zone, and God had already called me to it. And he has opened my eyes to so much more if I would have just listened. But he still did it at the right time. It took him 4 years to talk to me, and I finally listened. And it doesn't matter what stage you are in your life for you to listen to God, because he still has places and things for you to do no matter when. As long as you say yes, he's going to use you wherever you are. He showed me that I can go far away and I can go a state away, but I'm still going to see that there is so much brokenness here in Jackson and just my neighbors, and there are thousands and thousands of youth that still have to be reached in Jackson, and that requires leaving the one place that I'm comfortable and going to them, and leaving everything I know, just like Jesus did, to reach the one out of the 99, because they are still as important as the one that's in the church. And so it's been amazing to see that God has shown me so much uncomfortableness, but he has made me so much more alive and freeing through working through it. So if I wouldn't have embraced the uncomfortable he had placed before me, I would be in the same place, and I would not have known that he was going to change the trajectory of my life. I would have been on one set route, but I would have missed on so much joy and so much happiness and so much of what he was going to do in my life if I wouldn't have just moved and said yes. And it's not going to be huge all the time, and it's not going to be small all the time, but he's still going to move once we say yes. So that is a lot of what I've learned this past year, and I'm so excited because I'm only 20, and I still get to see so much of what he's called me to. And instead of looking at these as 20 years that have been out of the way and that I missed out on, I get to look and say, okay, here's another day that I have, that I get to serve God with all that I have, and there's never a time limit on serving him.
embracing the uncomfortable. Thank you, Rachel. And she shared with this change in her life and the direction God's taken her, changing her major as well. And at Spring Arbor University, she's now majoring in youth ministry and is coming on board here at the church here as an intern, in youth ministry. So we're excited to have her working with that. Right now, she's leading our high school group on Wednesday night and is excited about many other opportunities to engage with students in Jackson. I just know not to call her or scheduling meetings before 9 o'clock in the morning. But now she is wonderful. She's great. I love being able to work with her on that and just seeing how God is working in her life. And that's a great example, a great testimony of getting involved in service. It doesn't always work out perfect. Things get messy. This morning's been messy. We do this service for the 9:30. We do it again for the 11 o'clock and flip it around. I started that song earlier completely wrong, and my guitar quit working. This remote's half working. Things get messy. But as you are willing to just give yourself to God, He makes beautiful things. And He brings beauty into brokenness as well. Because that's the example of Jesus Christ and what He did. Jesus kept extending His hand, healing the lepers, blessing the children, washing feet, until, as Kyle Eidelman, the pastor, says it this way, they finally had to nail His hands down to get Him to stop. Get uncomfortable to serve others for Jesus. And as we do that, we get to experience the joy that God really has for us, what He has in store for us. There's a quote by St. Teresa that says this, Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which He looks with compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which He walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which He blesses all of the world. You are that opportunity for others as you serve Him. I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up here. And I want to put it in these words. You know, we're not considered good because of the good we do, the good that we do to others. We are good because we are loved by God. And because we are loved, we do good to others. Don't miss that. The reason that we are called to do good to others is not to try to make things right with God. It's really because of what the love God has had for us, the love that God has for us. And through that, we do good to others. And it brings about an amazing cycle of blessings and of love. That is the opportunity we have before us. For us to be that flower or that beauty in the brokenness around us. I'm giving you a homework assignment this week, and that is to find someone in your neighborhood that you can do something for, and then do it. To be challenged to find something that you can do, something simple or even something big, that can be an encouragement to someone else. Because the good that we do is because of the good that the Father is to us.